morning, everyone. Welcome back to Empowered Exploration. I am still here in London, England, but I think this will be my last vlog that is actually here with me in London, England. I still have a couple more stories to tell, and I'll tell them when I land back home, but I think this is it. This is the last time I'll ever do a vlog in my weirdly small little flat in my apartment, so that's really bittersweet. Which means that today's story is going to be really special because it's my last story while I'm actually physically here in London, and I wanted to talk about my fearless friend that I met all by myself here in London. So I posted that I was doing a vlog series in this group. I believe it was like the Blind and Visually Impaired Friends Network, and a woman asked if she could send a message to her friend and, kind of connect us and hook us up. It's almost like, it's a little bit like blind dating, almost, except definitely not blind dating. And I said, sure, why not? And this woman and I started chit-chatting. She's just recently moved here from South Africa, and she's this incredibly, I'll tell her more about her in a minute, but we decided to meet up. We both have the exact same eye condition, so that's really cool. She's a little bit older than me, so I think she wanted me to feel comfortable here and tell me a little bit about London accessibility, which I was incredibly grateful for. But we decided to meet up. And this was about 2 weeks ago that we did this, the first time. I've actually met up with her a couple times before, but this is important, not only because I met this incredible person, but because I was brave enough to go out by myself and to find her and to find the place we were supposed to meet with no data on my phone and a tube pass and a slight knowledge of maps. So we agreed to meet at this park. It was this sort of restaurant in a park. And I knew the tube stop, so I planned out my tube journey. That was actually the easiest part. Got in there, got on the train, and, switched lines like I'm supposed to because there are signs and you can always ask for help. And I thought I'd be fine. I was like, oh yeah, no worries, I'll have no problem finding you. Yeah, we'll meet at 3:30. It'll be no issue whatsoever. And I walk out of the tube station where I'm supposed to be meeting her and find this park, and there's no park anywhere. I forgot that, you would have to walk a little bit to get to a park. And the map directions that I had cited and taken a screenshot of were walk 500 feet on Bleecker Street or something like that. And I was like, where's Bleecker Street? What's 500 feet? Does anyone know off the top of their head what 500 feet is translated into walking steps? No. So I took a guess. I exited the station and I just took a guess, and I think I turned right. And thank God I was actually right. I walked down the street a couple times. I looked for trees. So where there was more trees clustered, I kind of walked in that area, and sure enough, after 3 minutes of just walking in a general direction, I found a sign that said, "Park, such and such park, that way." And I was like, yes. So I took a guess. Thank God it was an educated guess, but it was a guess. And of course, I felt like I could have asked for help, but there's this dilemma inside of me where I'm stuck between, it's almost like a couple going on a road trip where the man doesn't want to ask directions and wants to figure it out by themselves, but the woman is like, don't be stupid and ask for directions. It's kind of like that. That was happening inside my heart right now. And my inner stubbornness, I figured it out on my own. And I got to the park. But then, because we weren't meeting at the park, we were meeting at a restaurant inside the park, then I had to figure out how to get to the restaurant inside the park. So, inside of the park, there was this nice picture map, and I got super close to it to try and read it, and I couldn't figure it out for about 3 minutes. And I was just staring at it, and there were people coming up behind me and looking and pointing and going off in their own directions, and I was just kind of like, okay. And eventually I found the restaurant that I was looking for, and I took screenshot directions of how to get there, and I figured it out. But The whole point of this beginning part of the story is that when I first arrived in London, I never would have been able to do that. I never would have been brave enough to do that. Because I got lost. And I had to figure it out. And I remember telling my story about how I got lost the first time and how rewarding that experience was. But I was also within 10 minutes of my apartment. Here I was, two tube lines away, at least 20 minutes away from help, and no way to contact people for help because I had no data on my phone. So I'll get to this in a little bit in a minute, but I really want to tell you about her. So I eventually find the place, and I got there first, and so I have my monocular out, and I have my mobility cane at my side, and I'm standing in a corner, and I'm just looking for that really blonde hair. Because as you know, as you've heard, people with albinism have really, really, really blonde hair and pale skin, and I love that. Not because that's better in any way whatsoever, but it means that we stand out in a crowd. I love looking unique in a crowd because it means that instead of me having to find people, I just say, hey, look for me and find me, and I know that they'll be able to find me easily because they look for the super blonde hair. So that's what I was doing. I didn't see it, and then all of a sudden, like 5 minutes after our designated meeting time, I see this woman with really blonde hair coming up, and she looks at me for a minute too until she gets closer, and then she recognizes me and I recognize her, and she apologizes because the buses run slower on the weekends, and it was great. And we actually ended up walking around and getting food from a grocery store and just having a picnic and chit-chatting, and she told me her story and how she moved here and how accessible and more accessible she finds London than her old cities, and how she's looking for these incredible job opportunities and going through interviews. It was incredible just talking with her. And she's a little bit older than me, at least 10 years older than me, and she is where I want to be in that time period, which is really cool because I got to meet it. I got to meet a woman who is, in millennial speak, #goals. So I loved meeting her. I loved doing that by myself. And that happened right at the 2-week mark, when that's the moment after which I met her that I realized how accessible London really was, and that I could go out and do things like that by myself. Where I'm from, in Kentucky, I could never ever get to point A or point B, or point A from point B to all by myself. I couldn't do it. I'd always have to have someone helping me. I'd always have to get a ride from someone or have someone walk with me somewhere, unless I'm on my college campus. But that doesn't really count, does it? Because this was a great distance that I crossed to get from where I live in central London to where this park was and this woman was in the middle of this park. And that's remarkable. Not only that I did that, but that I did that with no data on my phone, with no knowledge of the area. And it's not necessarily a testament to me and how good I am. It's more a testament to how accessible London is. How incredible that tube network is. And how well the streets are marked here, and the crosswalks, and the maps. Because if I could figure it out, then, well, I mean, it was just pictures on a map with words. I didn't really check to see if there was Braille, but there are always people asking for help, she tells me. And what my friend told me is that she never feels like she can't get around anywhere here. She always feels safe because she knows that she can always have a way home. Whether it's with a bus or a tube or an Uber or a cab, she always feels like she can get home, which leads me to my big point of this story, is that she is fearless. Not because she doesn't get lost, or she doesn't get anxious, or she doesn't make mistakes or fail at things. She's fearless because she's not afraid of doing any of that. She's not afraid of feeling anxious. She's not afraid of making a mistake and getting lost, which we did get lost a couple times trying to walk to the grocery store because, you know, when you're walking through a crowd and it's really glary, sometimes you make mistakes and you go up the wrong street, or you get disoriented and you don't remember where you are. But instead of letting that, stop her, here she feels like she can push past that and keep going. because she knows that she's going to be okay. And for me, that was really cool to hear her say that. And it really made me reconsider where I want to live and the careers that I want to have. And it unfortunately made me question if I could even continue to live where I live in Kentucky. Because where I live is not accessible at all. There's a bus, there are sidewalks, sort of, but there's no metro, there's no tube. I can't get from one town to the other. And we discussed that too. It was kind of nice to talk about it with somebody who understands it completely. And this is another thing too, why I like being a part of these blind support networks and these Facebook groups and meeting people that are just like me, is that you have an instant connection with this person. Because being blind it affects so many aspects of our life that it becomes a very big thing in our lives. Even if we tell ourselves that it isn't a big thing, it still affects us. And so when you meet someone who is affected by the same thing, all of a sudden you don't have to go through that small talk and that, that time you're just connected. On so many fundamental levels of friendship, you're connected. Because you don't have to sit here and try and articulate what you're feeling when you know that the person sitting across from you feels it too. And it helped that we both had the exact same disability. The only difference was that she was a couple steps ahead of her life than I was. But we were still here in the same city. We still found each other. We still figured it out. We talked about London accessibility. We talked about our life goals. And then we actually met about a week later, and we had, drinks at a pub with Winston Churchill's portrait, and we had another picnic. I had fun with her. She was the highlight of my trip. Not anything that I've seen or done with my class. This was the highlight because I did it by myself and I met her. And I know that story was kind of jumbled, and I'm kind of just talking it out. And I'll be more than happy to retell the story later, but what I really want to get at is that I am living in a city where I can do that. She actually told me a story about how she picked up her friend from the airport. She, the blind woman, picked up her friend from the airport and took her around London for a couple hours because she got on the tube and just got there, and it only took her an hour, and then she got back. In what world would I be able to do that where I am from, where the airport is in another city over 45 minutes away with a car? What world would I be able to be like, yep, I picked up my friend from the airport? And even she just felt like that was a huge monumental moment for her because that was the first time she was ever able to pick up anybody from the airport. And it's something that my class tells me that they don't ever think about. And this is why they find my vlog so interesting. It's because they don't ever have to worry about driving or seeing or walking down the street. It's so different for them to hear my stories about me doing the things that they get to do every single day. And I'm not saying that they take them for granted. Nobody should ever feel like they take anything fundamental for granted. But it's just interesting for me and my classmates to kind of process this together and realize how far behind the cities that we are from the rest of the world. We realize how beneficial, accessible transportation is to people. And we start to realize and we get to see, especially through me, how transformative it can be when stuff as simple as accessible transportation or even money with Braille on it can be. And we don't ever think about that. And I think we are so used to people with disabilities just being stuck inside their shell when in reality, when we are put on the same playing field as everybody else, oftentimes we exceed everyone's basic expectations. And I love being here where I am on that same playing field and I'm able to do things by myself. And I really get to show how incredible I am, not as a person with a disability, but just as me. And just as my friend, who was going into job interviews and getting jobs that she would never have been able to apply for because she couldn't get to them where she was from. Not because she's underqualified. I believe she has a couple PhDs, actually. So, there's that. She's obviously very qualified for what she wants to do. But when your disability no longer holds you back, and when you're able to do the same fundamental things as everybody else, people kind of get surprised at what people with disabilities can accomplish. It's almost as if they forget that many times we are overqualified and we have a different way of thinking about things, and that we are fearless because we have to conquer our fears every single day. So, my tips for this story are that I recommend London as a city to go to. That's actually my biggest tip. My biggest tip is to go to London for at least a little while and just experience true accessibility, or even a city in the United States that you feel is particularly accessible. Go for a vacation and experience it. And don't feel sad when you come back to your city that isn't nearly as accessible, because I'm not sad to come home. In fact, I'm very anxious and I really want to come home. But take what you learn from the city that you are visiting, like for example London, and bring it with you back home. Maybe start talking to people in government positions about the importance of accessibility. Maybe start researching how to start a bus system. Maybe start communicating with your friends and asking if you could carpool. Maybe start researching for jobs in the city that you vacationed in if you feel like that's necessary. But my tip is that if you are stuck in a hometown where it is not accessible, and the reason why you are stuck there might be completely unique to you, maybe it's family, maybe it's fear, maybe it's a safety issue, like how I feel stuck where I'm from because of my family and my friends. You have to work. I would suggest that you start processing and thinking about what's really best for you and what you want to do. Because I don't think that where I'm from is where I'm meant to be. And it's kind of hard to process that. And we talked about that, me and my friend, because she left a life behind to come here to London and to start over. And that was incredibly difficult. And this is really why she is fearless, because she did it. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because she did it, despite that fear. And that's truly remarkable to me. And her advice was not to wait until I'm in my 30s to do it like she did. Her advice was to figure it out now, no matter what you have to go through or process. So I think this was a nice conclusion to me actually being in London. I'm still going to be posting videos when I get back home about London, but as for me physically being here, I fly home in 2 days. And for me to come to that conclusion about how maybe I'm not supposed to be where I'm coming home to, it's difficult, but it gives me a certain sense of clarity when I'm coming home. And it doesn't necessarily make me feel sad that I'm leaving London, because again, a part of me feels like I'm going to come back. I don't know if this is where I'm supposed to be or where I'm going to end up, but I just know that London is a city that I could flourish in. And that's something for me to personally consider. And if you're on the verge of that consideration too, I hope maybe this vlog series has given you some sort of clarity and maybe even empowered you to go out and explore and find a place where you can flourish too. So I will see you guys next time in the United States. I'll still be sharing stories about London. I might even continue to share stories about other stuff too, but from me to you across an ocean, this is it. See you guys next time.